feel like I did do a whole lot of learning in there. Well, that could be because of a whole bunch of factors. Maybe you're not interested in the subject, the content was too hard, or maybe you've just come back from holidays and you've lost a bit of brain power. Don't worry, it will come back. The principle of training that we're going to cover. Make sure that athletes walk out of each training session having accomplished a thing or two and made the most of their time. So, make sure you check out those points below, and today we're going to look at the purpose of the principle of training. And then, we're going to some key principles, including progressive, overload, specificity, reversibility, variety, training, threshold, and the warm-up and cool-down. Okay, so training for a sport is all well and good. But if the programs aren't tailored to meet the specific demands of the athletes and their sport, then you can beat your bottom dollar and athletes are not getting the most out of their session.
So the principles help them by making sure their training sessions are tailored to specific requirements. Their training at the right workload and rest periods are timed correctly. If athletes use all of these principles, and they will see bigger improvements at a faster rate than if they were to simply start exercising with no direction. Let's jump into these principles. Our first principle is progressive overload. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, whoever said that the new a thing or two about progressive overload? This principle is about gradually increasing the exercise load an athlete undertakes in order to see continuous improvements. Our bodies are incredible things. They adapt very quickly, and if the frequency and intensity of training an athlete does remain constant, their body will up to this workload and help further adaptations. So in order to see different and better results, athletes must alter their workload. For aerobic training, this might mean an increase in duration or distance of training, whereas for resistance training, this might mean higher reps or an increased weight. Next, we have specificity. If you're studying for a maths exam, would you sit down and write a history essay? No, that would be absolutely no benefit to you. The same goes as sports. Athletes have to train specifically to the energy system and the skill requirements needed for the sports, and even their position if they play a team sports. For an aerobic athlete, such as a long-distance cycler, this will mean training for a longer periods of time with no breaks and focusing on muscular endurance, particularly in the legs. For an aerobic athlete such as a 1-meter sprinter, this would mean training for a shorter period of time, more intensely, and focusing on specific muscle groups, again such as the legs. Right, our next principle of training is reversibility. You all would have experienced it. It's what happens when you go on holidays from school and come back and your brain feels like mush and 2 plus 2 starts equaling 5. For athletes, it's a lot of adaptations that they gain during training because of prolonged break period. Basically, use it or lose it. This principle happens when an athlete is injured and has to take time off training or at the end of a season during the recovery period. Adaptations tend to be lost at a similar rate to which they were gained. So gaining 3 kilos of muscle into 2 weeks means this muscle would be lost very quickly if training stopped. Aerobic adaptations tend to be lost within 4 to 6 weeks, but this can be somewhat prevented with 2 minimal intensity training sessions a week. Aerobic adaptations are lost at a bit of a faster rate within 1 to 2 weeks, but again can be slowed down by training just once per week at variety. This principle serves 2 purposes. It prevents boredom and keeps athletes engaged and motivated to train. Secondly, it ensures they are training holistically. This means that every muscle group of fitness component is covered and different muscle groups and energy systems are given a break. So, aerobic athletes would alternate between different aerobic training methods. Simply running for 30 minutes every session would cause disinterest and limited improvement. Similarly, anaerobic athletes would alternate between different anaerobic training methods. Now, let's dive into training thresholds. These are simply the zones at which athletes need to train if they want to see improvement and adaptation in the necessary energy system. Also, basically, aerobic and anaerobic athletes have to train at a different percentage of their maximum heart rate to see improvement. Quick note, one way to simply calculate your max heart rate is 220 minus your age. So if aerobic athletes like our marathon runners want to see improvements in their cardiovascular system performance, they have to train between 60 to 80% of their maximum heart rate. If they train below this point, they see no improvements, but above it, they will be training in the anaerobic zone. The anaerobic training zone is at 80 to 90% of maximum heart rate. Again, this is where our sprinter weightlifters will be training. Below this will be in the aerobic zone, but above this isn't idea either. Above 90% of maximum heart rate, something happens called the concept of love locate accumulation. Basically, it's where the locates start forming and the muscles and athletes fatigue so perfectly so they cannot train for long enough of adaptation for a course.
Course training at the higher end of each zone, just under the threshold where the most adaptations occur. The final principle that we need to run through today is the warm-up and the cool-down. The warm-up happens for about 20 minutes at the beginning of each session. And there is two key phases. The first is general warm-up. This is where the athletes generally increase their heart rate, respiration rate, and prepare the muscle for the anticipated demands of the session ahead. Doing this means athletes will be able to move faster and more powerfully. So again, getting the most out of these sessions. Then, we have the specific warm-up. Here, athletes have to perform movements that are super similar to those that they have to do in the session. So for example, a network could run around the court for the whole 20 minutes, or they could do some grapevine, plunges, and touch jumps to get the mind thinking about those movements from the get-go. The cool-down simply lower all the things we raise in the warm-up, the heart rate, respiration rate, etc. And it's super important to prevent injury and prepare the athlete for the next session. It also prevents DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness, by removing all built-up lactic acid that accumulated in the training session. And that is for today, guys. Let's have a quick recap before we sign off. So today, we look at why we actually care about the principle of training. We give training session a direction and a focus and ensure the athletes are making the most improvements possible. Then we dive into the principle and look at the progressive overload, specificity, reversibility variety, training thresholds, and the warm-up and cool